Welcome back to another episode of the Healing Chamber Podcast. This is Layla Rose, and today we are talking about modern mental slavery and what does it mean and how we can escape it, basically. So, even though slavery is not legal anymore, there is still something called a slavery consciousness or a slavery programming, which most people are stuck in within our society. Obviously, it's very different from ancient slavery. It's very different, but it's still very powerful, and it creates so much poverty. This is, the main reason why I want to discuss this a little bit more. So the modern mental slavery is actually the whole system that our society is based upon. So corporate America is a big one, because when you talk to people that are working for a corporation, they know how toxic and destructive it is, but still they're gonna tell you, I need this job, I really have to keep this job, I really need my paycheck. And this is how you know when you're talking to someone that is operating from this slavery programming, because you cannot have a conversation, especially if you're out of that programming. It is nearly impossible to have a conversation with someone with this type of program, because they are going to defend the corporations, or at least they're going to defend their position and say things like, well, there's a lot of health benefits, insurances related to my job. And it's like, are you even kidding me? And I'm not laughing, obviously, at that, because I used to have this programming. This is why I'm talking about it, because I know how to get out of it. But for a decade, I used to be that type of person who thought that, having a job was safe. It was a safety net, which is the biggest lie and the biggest myth, because we all know that a job is absolutely unstable. You have bosses that can decide tomorrow that they don't need you anymore. They decide when you take your vacations. They decide at what time you wake up and when you're eating for lunch, if you can take any vacations. They have so much power over people's life. And, and again, the argument, people are going to be like, well, I need this job. I have bills to pay. I need to survive. And once again, it's a survival programming that there is no type of conversation that you can have with someone to remove that type of programming. People need to remove their own programming on their own. There's nothing we can do more than that. And so people are trading their abundance. People could be made, I've talked to people that are so smart, and I'm like, you could be making thousands of dollars. You could be making your monthly salary within one day. Who cares about insurances? Who cares about the little package that your little job is giving you? It's crazy, right? But once again, it's a personal journey, so there's no amount of convincing. But what I noticed is that when I was running with this program, because I used to have ancestors that were slaves, so the slavery consciousness was very deep within my DNA. I remember I would get so mad and jealous when I would see other women living the lifestyle that I wanted. I was bitter and I was angry, and I thought that they were just born into wealth, and I feel like that's, an assumption that a lot of people have when they first meet me. They're like, oh yeah, well, we know people just give you stuff, and it's like, well, it wasn't like that. I had to, cleanse my soul and do the whole alchemical process to remove all the programs that I used to run on. And that's just one of them, And I feel like the biggest sign that we're running on a slavery consciousness program is that we are also a slave to our own emotions, right? So when you talk to people that are in poverty, and that used to be me as well, I used to be very reactive. I would react to everything. I would react to the news. I would react to people like doing stuff. And, we go through this process at some point, or this, I don't know how you want to call it, your awakening journey, where it's like you learn to master your emotions, to ground your nervous system on a daily basis, by doing breath work, any type of somatic exercises. And then you rise above any obstacle, challenges, situations, right? But when you're running on a slavery consciousness program, you are a slave to emotions. You are a slave to money, because a lot of times, a few signs that people have this program, they say stuff, on social media, like they leave comments like, that must be nice, or, oh, you're rich. Like, and you can, like, even by reading the comments, we can feel this energy of anger and bitterness, which I understand why, because, when we are raised by parents who are struggling, it creates a lot of animosity and bitterness at first, obviously, because being raised in an environment of poverty, there's a lot of abuse, there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of demonic entities, and it feels like hell on earth, and obviously I'm not saying like it's only in lower income, neighborhoods. Of obviously abuse, happens, unfortunately, like at any social status. But there's, there's a lot of studies and evidence that there's a lot more crimes and ignorance and, anger and crime, just, some negative, energy within the lower income, neighborhood. So, yeah. So another form as well of modern slavery, I would say, is when people think that they need to go to university or they need to send their children to university. That's another one that's really changing right now, especially with the economy. Obviously, if someone wants to be a doctor or a nurse or any form of profession, like a lawyer, where you need a very specific, certification, obviously university is, appropriate. But a lot of times when I talk to people and they're sending their children to university, they could be, oh my God, they could be saving so much money and just do like an online certification and just be ready to go and ready to work within a few months. But no, they're like, my kids have to go to that university and everything. And their children now start their young adulthood, or, sometimes the parent take the debt. And so you have a parent or a kid or a young adult with a lot of debt, especially in the US. Like, you guys have some crazy tuition fees. It's absolutely insane compared to countries that offer free education. It's unbelievable. And that's another way for the banks to keep people enslaved to the system, because now you have a lot of debt, and then you kind of have this subconscious fear of not having enough, or it's just fear, right? It's just running in loops of fear. So yeah, absolutely, I would never pressure my children to go to school, especially university. But obviously I'm going to push them to read a lot, to get educated on their own, and to really start their own business venture extremely young, like especially for a little boy. Oh my god, if you're like 12, you need a business. It could be, passing around the journals, which is not going to exist very soon anymore, but any form of like lawn work, or like stuff that little boys do. It's a very good introduction for the world of business. Right, financial management and stuff like that. But yeah, it's interesting to see that even if slavery is not legal anymore, and we don't see that form of like ancient slavery, that it's still very present. But we have to remember, like, even with ancient slavery, people had options, right? And so obviously the history books don't talk about that part that much, but a lot of people actually decided to unalive themselves instead of being a slave, which obviously is very dramatic, and I'm not saying that's what people should do in the current economy, but obviously those were, the options were very limited. Let's just say that the options were very limited, but there were still options. Another option, obviously, back then was to burn the crops. A lot of people absolutely rebelled and started burning down the crops. Other people started, learning and doing some black magic, dark magic, shadow magic, which is very powerful, and it can obviously help you get away from any type of situation where you feel that you are oppressed. That was a hard one. But yeah, like I said, the options were very limited back then, but there were still options. A lot of people actually decided not to become slaves. But obviously, when you are a descendant of slaves, just like I am, the people had to develop these coping mechanisms to survive. And obviously, I'm a descendant of the slaves that decided to become enslaved. So that's just a logical aspect of it. But if you're a descendant of slaves that decided to obviously stay alive because you are there, you might have this enslavement consciousness. And the cool thing I would say about that is that when we learn how to do alchemy in a very practical way, which took me years to fully grasp and understand, because all I was hearing was people saying, turn your pain into power, turn your trauma into power. But these were not actionable steps. And that's why I got stuck in a loop of being constantly in power struggles, situations with corporate America. In my personal life, it was just like this constant struggle, up until the day that I decided, like, I'm not gonna live like this anymore, and we cannot underestimate the power of free will. Obviously, like, that's the first one, like, and that's why I've been saying, from the beginning, this is a personal journey. Like, you cannot decide for someone's free will, if that makes sense. Obviously, if you're in a reality where you're meeting or connecting with a lot of people with this slavery consciousness, it might mean that you still have a part of your subconscious that also have that, because human connections are like mirrors. They reflect to us what's happening inside, especially if it's triggering. If it's not triggering, obviously, it's just whatever, like people walking by. But if it is triggering, then it means that there's some part that needs to be healed within the subconscious, right? So let me know if you have any questions about what I said today, and hopefully that was valuable to you, and I'll see you tomorrow for our next episode.